The lion shifted slightly, dragging his injured paw across the dry earth with a grimace that rippled through his shoulders. Every movement was deliberate, cautious, weighed down by pain and confusion. Dust rose around him, catching the pale sunlight in motes that hung like fragile glass. His eyes flickered to the rangers again, sharp and wary, yet edged with the exhaustion of prolonged suffering. Small whimpers escaped his throat, soft, almost inaudible, a sound of raw discomfort that pressed against the silence of the grass. The rangers adjusted their distance, inching closer with hands empty, bodies low, maintaining a rhythm of calm and patience. One crouched behind a clump of acacia, assessing the angle of the snare, while another extended a gloved hand, letting it rest briefly on the soil between them and the lion, a gesture of steady presence. The lion's tail twitched, a subtle sign of agitation, and his ears rotated, catching every whisper of movement. He was alert, caught between instinctive caution and the gradual realization that the humans were not immediate threats. The metal snare clinked faintly as it scraped the earth, a harsh reminder of the injury he bore. The lion tested his paw, flexing claws and toes, the sharp intake of breath betraying the deep ache that ran up his leg. Each careful tug of the restraining wire produced a subtle shudder of pain, yet he endured, a quiet endurance shaped by necessity and survival. His mane, streaked with sweat and dust, shimmered faintly as the sun climbed higher, a halo of golden patience around his battered form. "It's okay, boy," one ranger murmured, voice barely above the whisper of leaves. The words hung in the air like a soft wind, not a command but a fragile promise of help. The lion's eyes narrowed, and then slowly, with almost imperceptible easing, he allowed them to approach closer, the tension in his muscles easing fractionally. Every gesture was measured, a delicate negotiation of space and trust, his movements a language of instinct and response rather than understanding. Around them, the savanna remained suspended, alive in muted colors and hushed sounds. The rangers worked with tools that glinted under the morning light, hands steady, breaths even. The lion shifted once more, a subtle tremor in his chest as he lowered his head slightly, the snare pressing cruelly against his paw. And yet, within that quiet suffering, a fragile connection formed, a momentary bridge between predator and human, threaded with patience, respect, and the shared understanding of pain. As the grass whispered around them, the world seemed to hold itself in a breath, waiting for the next careful step toward relief. The lion's movements remained cautious, deliberate, each step measured as if testing the firmness of the ground beneath him. His paw, freshly freed yet raw and tender, pressed gently against the earth, muscles stiff with lingering tension. Every twitch of his tail, every subtle rotation of the ears, revealed a mind still alert, attuned to both pain and the unfamiliar safety surrounding him. He lowered his head briefly, nostrils flaring as he drew in the scents of the grass and dust, grounding himself in the moment. The rangers remained motionless, bodies loose and low, eyes observing without intrusion. One crouched nearby, hand hovering close to the ground, ready to intervene if necessary but offering only silent support. The lion's amber gaze met theirs once more, sharp yet softened by fatigue, a fleeting bridge of understanding passing between human and predator. Small tremors ran along his shoulder blades as he shifted his weight, yet the growls had ceased, replaced by shallow rhythmic breaths that suggested a tentative easing of tension. Sunlight glinted off his tawny coat, highlighting the jagged edges of dried blood that clung faintly to fur around the paw. Each careful step was a negotiation, a test of balance, of pain, and of trust. His massive body, though heavy with the weight of suffering, carried a grace tempered by instinct and endurance. The dust and fallen grass swirled softly around him with each movement, catching the light like scattered gold. "Almost there," murmured a ranger, voice gentle, barely more than a whisper over the soft rustle of the plains. The lion paused, ears pivoting, then resumed, head lifted, gaze steady, muscles relaxing in tiny increments. He circled slowly, testing freedom, stretching his limbs carefully, each motion deliberate yet cautious, reclaiming autonomy with quiet dignity. The savanna breathed again, wind teasing the grass, insects drifting lazily through the air, a distant bird lifting from a branch with soft wings. The humans held back, letting him set the pace, their presence a calm counterpoint to the residual tension in his body. In that fragile morning light, with the snare now abandoned on the earth, the lion's slow, measured steps spoke of resilience, of trust earned, and of a delicate freedom finally returned to him. The lion's breathing settled into a slow, steady rhythm, each exhale lifting fine dust from the dry earth beneath him. He shifted slightly, rolling his shoulder against the cool shade, muscles easing as the tension of injury gradually loosened. Tiny tremors in his limbs had diminished, replaced by careful, deliberate movements, each one testing strength and flexibility without strain. Occasionally he lifted his massive head, amber eyes sweeping the grass around him, alert yet increasingly unguarded, curiosity softening the wariness that had marked the early hours. The rangers remained at the edges of the clearing, crouched or kneeling, their movements unhurried and deliberate. One held a shallow bowl of water, setting it near enough for the lion to reach but far enough to allow autonomy, while another brushed gently along the edges of his mane, loosening clinging dust and dried blood. Their hands never intruded abruptly. Every touch was slow, respectful, a silent promise of care rather than control. The lion's ears flicked at the faintest sound, nostrils quivering with scents of earth, leaves and the human's quiet presence, yet he did not retreat. Small, almost imperceptible adjustments of his posture indicated awareness mingled with acceptance, a subtle dialogue conducted in gestures rather than words. A distant breeze rustled the acacia leaves above, carrying the soft calls of birds and the faint rustle of grazing antelope. The lion's tail flicked with measured rhythm, brushing the dust in arcs that mirrored his easing tension. He drank again from the water, each lap deliberate, his muzzle wet and shining in the late light. When he raised his head afterward, the gaze held a tentative softness, amber eyes reflecting trust that had only begun to form, a fragile bridge across the gulf of instinctive caution. Evening deepened, bathing the savanna in dusky gold and shadowed violet. The lion stretched, legs extended, muscles flexing and releasing with ease, a silent affirmation of returning strength. The rangers observed, still and patient, allowing him space while ready to respond if needed. In that quiet interlude, a bond, unspoken and delicate, began to root itself, a gentle understanding born of patience, respect, and the shared rhythm of life in the wild. As the sun sank lower, the lion's eyes lingered on the horizon, amber glimmers catching the soft glow, and in that lingering gaze lay a silent acknowledgement of care, trust, and the fragile, unspoken connection that now held them together. The lion paused a few paces away, his amber eyes scanning the humans with cautious curiosity. Each step forward was careful, deliberate, the powerful muscles beneath tawny fur coiling and releasing like tempered springs. The subtle tension in his shoulders betrayed a lingering instinctive caution, yet the rhythm of his movement carried a newfound confidence, tempered by familiarity and the unspoken patience of those who had tended to him. Dust rose in faint clouds beneath his paws, catching the warm afternoon light, and the scent of grass and earth clung to him, mingling with the faint trace of bandages that had marked his recovery. The rangers remained still, bodies low, hands empty but ready, breaths synchronized with the whisper of wind through the tall savanna grass. One extended a slow hand, hovering just above the ground, an invitation without command. The lion's ears flicked at the gentle murmurs of reassurance, and his tail, once stiff and alert, swayed softly, a subtle indicator of curiosity mingled with tentative trust. Step by careful step, he closed the distance, each movement an act of courage measured against instinct, pain, and memory of the snare. "It's all right, you're safe," one ranger whispered, voice barely carrying over the faint rustle of grass. The words seemed to settle around him, not as instruction but as a quiet acknowledgement of presence and care. The lion lowered his head further, allowing his mane to brush against the outstretched hand, a delicate, almost ceremonial gesture. The faint rumble in his chest vibrated through the still air, resonating against the human's calm steadiness, a heartbeat shared in quiet communion. Around them, the savanna seemed suspended, sunlight turning the grass to molten gold, shadows stretching long and thin. Insects hummed softly, distant calls of antelope punctuated the stillness, yet all life seemed to defer to the fragile moment unfolding. The lion lingered, eyes meeting theirs again, amber and unflinching, carrying a wordless acknowledgement of patience, care, and the bridge of trust they had nurtured. Each subtle shift of his massive body, the gentle sway of the shoulders, the measured adjustment of weight, spoke volumes of confidence earned, of fear dissipated, of connection forged in silence. As the sun sank lower, a warm glow wrapped the scene, brushing his flanks with amber light. The humans remained still, hearts quiet, allowing him the grace of his presence. In that tender pause, the impossible seemed to exist, a predator choosing vulnerability, a fragile trust made manifest, a moment of shared understanding that would linger long after footsteps faded and the wind whispered through the golden savanna. The lion's steps were measured, each pawfall soft against the dew-kissed grass, a rhythm both natural and deliberate. His muscles rippled under the golden coat, taut with the quiet energy of strength regained. The distant calls of his pride rose and fell across the plains, a familiar cadence that drew him onward, a tether to the life that had once seemed beyond reach. Each movement carried a balance of eagerness and caution, as if honoring the space that had nurtured his recovery while responding to the pull of kin waiting in the shade of acacia trees. The rangers lingered behind, careful shadows among the tall grasses, breathing quietly, bodies still yet attentive. There was no rush, no gesture to hasten his progress, only the patient acknowledgement that he would choose the moment to reclaim his place. His ears twitched at the faint calls, and his tail moved in subtle arcs, brushing the grasses as he advanced, a silent language of anticipation and readiness. The morning light glinted off the scars that now marked his healed paw, a reminder of trials overcome and patience rewarded. Step by step, he closed the distance, nostrils flaring with scent, amber eyes scanning both the familiar humans and the approaching pride. At last, he halted, a deliberate pause that seemed to suspend the world. Head lifted, gaze met theirs, the rangers who had walked patiently alongside his suffering and recovery. For a fleeting heartbeat, the lion's eyes lingered, amber warmth tempered by quiet understanding, acknowledgement shimmering in a glance that carried the weight of trust, of gratitude, of something unspoken yet profoundly felt. Then, with a subtle nod of the head and a measured shift of weight, he turned, the motion smooth and fluid, and stepped fully toward the waiting pride. A low chorus of roars answered him as he merged with family, the massive bodies of siblings and cubs brushing past, a living rhythm of connection and belonging restored. The golden mane caught the early sun, catching glimmers that melded him seamlessly into the rolling plains, his figure becoming one with the earth, wind, and light. The humans remained where they were, motionless, letting him reclaim the space that had been his before injury. The grass swayed around them, a soft rustle carrying the echoes of the morning, of patience rewarded and trust affirmed. In that quiet moment, the savanna seemed to hold its breath, honoring the cycle of care, survival, and the fragile, enduring bond between human and wild. And as the lion disappeared into the embrace of his pride, the rangers exhaled slowly, hearts heavy with awe, the image of amber eyes and a golden mane lingering long after the wind swept across the endless plains.